The night before his wedding, Ethan Miller sat alone in his home office, reviewing a few final security updates before shutting down for the night. He clicked on a routine file from his gym's camera system, expecting nothing more than background noise. Instead, a soft whisper cut through the speakers, Laura's voice, unmistakable and ice cold. She was laughing quietly with Derek, her trainer, discussing how she would marry Ethan, wait 6 months, file for divorce, and walk away with half of everything he owned. They spoke casually about moving to Miami, as if Ethan's life were nothing more than a bank account waiting to be emptied. For a long moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. His hands went numb. 200 guests were expecting a celebration. He was expecting a future. But in that instant, the man who thought he had it all realized he had been living inside a lie. Mark showed up at Ethan's door the next morning, his expression tight, carrying a USB drive like it weighed 100 pounds. Ethan barely slept, replaying the recording again and again, hoping he had misheard something, anything. But when Mark walked in and quietly said, "You need to see this," Ethan knew the nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. They sat in the living room in complete silence as Mark pulled up video after video, message after message. In one clip, Laura leaned against Derek's car, smirking as she explained how smart women capitalize on opportunities. In another, Derek bragged to a coworker about the easy money coming their way after the wedding. But the worst wasn't the words. It was the tone, the comfort, the familiarity. The clear evidence that this wasn't a sudden temptation, but a long-term plan crafted behind Ethan's back. Ethan felt his chest tighten each time the screen changed. 4 years of memories flashed in his mind. Holidays spent with her family, nights she cried on his shoulder, mornings she kissed him before work. All of it suddenly looked staged, rehearsed, performed. He wondered how many times he had mistaken manipulation for affection. How many lies he had believed simply because he wanted to believe them. Mark paused one clip when Derek said, "Once she gets the 6-month mark, that's when the payday hits." Ethan leaned back, jaw clenched so hard he thought it might crack. He didn't shout. He didn't break anything. He just sat there, breathing slowly, holding himself together with sheer force of will. Mark watched him carefully, ready to intervene, but Ethan only said, "Keep going." They continued for another hour as Ethan collected each file, organizing them with the precision of a man preparing for war. Not a violent war, but a strategic one. One that required calm, clarity, and absolute control. He refused to let Laura take another piece of him, not his dignity, not his business, not his composure. When the final video ended, Ethan closed his eyes. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He felt something colder happen instead, an internal shift, a door closing, a trust dying. He realized in that moment that the woman he loved never truly existed. She was a version built for him, tailored to his hopes, worn like a costume meant to keep him blind. Mark placed a hand on his shoulder and said softly, "I'm sorry, man. I really thought she loved you." Ethan nodded, eyes still fixed on the floor. "It wasn't love," he said finally. "It was a plan." He stood up, back straight, voice steady in a way that surprised even him. "All right," he said. "We do this quietly. No reaction. No warning. I'll gather everything I need, and she won't know a thing until it's already done." It was the moment Ethan stopped being the victim in his own story. It was the moment he chose to take his life back. The first call Ethan made was to his attorney, Daniel, a calm, methodical man who had seen every kind of relationship, disaster imaginable. Ethan sent him all the files, every recording, every message, every video. They spoke for nearly an hour, and with each explanation Daniel gave, Ethan felt a strange mixture of relief and bitterness. Relief, because Laura legally had no claim to his assets. Bitterness, because she had never loved him enough to care about the damage she planned to cause. When Ethan hung up, He exhaled slowly, steadying himself. The pieces were in place. Now came the delicate part, pulling the plug on a wedding that hundreds of people expected, without letting Laura suspect a thing. He started with the venue. The event manager answered cheerfully, unaware that Ethan's world had imploded less than 24 hours earlier. He kept his tone neutral as he requested a cancellation, accepted the forfeited deposit, and asked for written confirmation. Every sentence felt surreal. Just 2 days ago, he had been finalizing floral arrangements. Now, he was dismantling the entire event brick by brick. Next came the catering company. They expressed disappointment, offered alternatives, tried to negotiate a partial refund. Ethan declined, his voice polite but firm. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about severing every tie that connected him to a future built on deception. He continued down the list: photographer, videographer, string quartet, transportation service, hotel blocks. Each cancellation was another step away from a catastrophe he had narrowly escaped. He kept his explanations vague, saying scheduling issues or an urgent personal matter. No one pressed too hard. No one could sense the earthquake happening behind his calm tone. While he navigated the cancellations, Laura texted him pictures of centerpiece mock-ups and playful selfies in her wedding robe. Ethan stared at the messages, feeling nothing. Not anger. Not nostalgia. Just emptiness, a void where love used to live. He responded with short, simple replies, maintaining the illusion until everything was securely undone. By mid-afternoon, the wedding that had taken months to build was completely erased. All that remained were a few financial losses, nothing compared to what he would have faced had the ceremony gone forward. He sent every receipt, every confirmation, every cancellation notice into a neatly labeled folder on his computer, preparing for the confrontation he knew was inevitable. When he finally stepped away from his desk, exhaustion hit him like a wave. But beneath the fatigue was something steadier, something almost empowering. He had acted decisively, rationally, quietly. Laura still believed she was days away from marrying a man who adored her. She had no idea that the walls were closing in, that her perfect plan was already dust. Ethan stood by the living room window, watching late afternoon sunlight spill across the lawn. He felt the first hint of control returning to his life, the first breath that didn't hurt. He whispered to himself, one step at a time. And for the first time since hearing that recording, he believed he could actually win this. Laura found out about the postponed wedding the following morning, when her phone lit up with confused messages from friends asking if everything was all right. At first she laughed, assuming it was a glitch or a mistaken notification. But as more texts came in, some concerned, some curious, her smile faded. She stormed into the house, heels striking the floor like gunshots, calling Ethan's name with a mix of irritation and forced sweetness. Ethan was waiting for her in the living room, hands folded, expression unreadable. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind, prepared himself not to break, not to raise his voice, not to let her twist the narrative. When she demanded to know what was happening, he simply picked up the remote and pressed play. The recording filled the room instantly. Laura's voice. Derek's voice. The two of them discussing their plan with casual confidence, as if Ethan were nothing more than a signature waiting to be exploited. Laura froze, her eyes widening, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, she looked genuinely stunned, but the shock lasted only seconds before she snapped into defense mode. "That's fake," she said quickly. Her voice shook, but her eyes darted around, calculating. "Someone edited that. This is Derek's fault. He's been obsessed with me for months. You know how he is. He probably manipulated the audio." Ethan didn't speak. He just pressed a button and played the second clip. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each one chipped away at her excuses until her face crumpled, her bravado slipping like cracked paint. She tried again, this time crying, pleading, weaving a chaotic story about stress, insecurity, fear of losing him. She blamed her upbringing, blamed Derek, blamed her own moment of weakness. But the recordings showed months of planning, not a moment. And Ethan wasn't moved. When she realized crying didn't work, her expression hardened. The tears stopped instantly. Her shoulders squared. She looked at him with a cold, unapologetic stare and said, "Fine. I gave you 4 years. 4 years of my life. You owe me something." Ethan felt something inside him finally snap into place. Not anger, but clarity. He stood up slowly, meeting her gaze. "I don't owe you anything," he said quietly. Laura scoffed, packing, muttering threats about lawyers and reputation, and what people will think. She wasn't pleading anymore. She was cornered, and cornered people lash out. Ethan watched her unravel with a strange sense of detachment, like he was witnessing the fall of someone he used to know, but no longer recognized. When she finally stopped ranting, he pointed toward the hallway. "You have 48 hours to move out," he said. His voice was steady, calm, final. "There will be no wedding, no conversation, no negotiation, 48 hours. Laura stared at him, as if she couldn't comprehend the words. Then, slowly, her face twisted into disbelief, outrage, and something close to desperation. But Ethan didn't look away. He didn't soften. He didn't apologize. For the first time in years, he wasn't the one trying to fix things. He was the one ending them. Laura did not leave quietly. The moment the reality of Ethan's ultimatum sank in, she launched into a frenzy of phone calls, packing through the house like a storm that refused to dissipate. Within an hour, her parents were calling Ethan, demanding explanations, insisting there must be a misunderstanding. He repeated the same calm sentence each time. "Ask your daughter." He didn't elaborate. He didn't defend himself. He let the recordings speak for him. Laura's sister arrived next, barging through the front door without knocking. She tried to play mediator, tried to get Ethan to at least talk things through, insisting that no relationship ends over one mistake. Ethan didn't argue. He simply handed her a pair of headphones and let her listen. Halfway through the second clip, her face drained of color. She took the headphones off, muttered a quiet apology, and left without another word. But Laura refused to accept defeat. She called a friend who had recently finished 1 semester of law school and introduced him as her lawyer, a title he wore with awkward bravado. He threatened lawsuits, emotional damages, and breach of promise. Ethan calmly asked him which law he believed applied, and the young man fell silent within 30 seconds. He left the house flustered, and Laura screamed at him for being useless as he walked to his car. When legal threats failed, Laura shifted tactics. She began telling anyone who would listen that Ethan was cheating on her. She texted her bridesmaids that he had a gambling problem. She messaged her relatives, claiming he'd had a breakdown, and canceled the wedding out of paranoia. She even went as far as posting a long, melodramatic message on social media, accusing Ethan of emotional abuse and abandonment. Ethan's phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, distant cousins, business contacts, everyone wanted to know what had happened. He sent the same reply to all of them. "I'm fine. I appreciate your concern." Nothing more. He refused to join her in the mud. Meanwhile, Laura roamed the house with an air of theatrical victimhood, crying loudly whenever she thought Ethan might hear. She would knock on his office door every few hours, switching between sobbing apologies and furious accusations. Ethan didn't engage. He kept the door locked and continued documenting everything, determined not to let her provoke him into a mistake. On the second day, her desperation grew. She started blocking his path from room to room, asking if he really wanted to throw away everything they built. He didn't respond beyond a quiet, consistent reminder. "You have until tomorrow morning." The more emotion she displayed, the more disconnected he felt, as if watching a stranger trying to perform a role that no longer made sense. That night, she made one final attempt. She stood outside his bedroom door, voice trembling, promising therapy, change, anything he wanted. He didn't open the door. He simply told her, "Please pack your things." By sunrise, Ethan walked into the hallway to find her belongings neatly piled near the entrance, though she lingered nearby, still hoping he might break. He didn't. He opened the door, nodded once, and waited silently until she walked past him, tears streaking her face, anger simmering beneath them. She stepped outside, and for the first time since meeting her, Ethan felt the house exhale. The door closed behind her, gentle but final, marking the end of a storm he should have seen long before it hit. Word of the breakup spread faster than Laura ever expected, and the stories she had thrown out in panic began circling back to her in twisted, distorted forms. At first, she tried to keep up with the lies, adjusting details depending on who she spoke to, but the inconsistencies only made things worse. People compared notes. Screenshots leaked. Whispers followed her everywhere she went. Her closest friends, who had defended her blindly at the beginning, started distancing themselves as the truth surfaced. Some had been forwarded the recordings. Others had heard from Derek's coworkers, who confirmed that the affair had been going on for months. Within days, Laura went from a jilted bride to the architect of her own downfall. Derek's life wasn't spared either. His girlfriend confronted him outside the gym, shouting loud enough for half the parking lot to hear. When she threw the recordings in his face, he tried to deny everything, but the managers had already heard. By noon, he was fired, not just for the affair, but for using the gym as a planning ground for a financial scheme that could have landed them in legal trouble. His girlfriend left him on the spot, and he had to collect his things from the gym under the watchful eyes of staff who had once admired him. Laura watched Derek's collapse with a mixture of resentment and fear. He stopped answering her calls, stopped replying to her messages, stopped acknowledging her existence altogether. He had been willing to move across the country with her when things looked promising, but the moment everything went up in flames, he abandoned the plan and left her to deal with the aftermath alone. Without Derek, without her friends, without a fiancé, she had nowhere to go. Her parents let her stay for a few nights, but tension rose quickly. They were embarrassed. Neighbors whispered. Her mother asked her directly, "Did you really plan to take half of his assets?" Laura didn't answer. Silence was answer enough. When she tried returning to the gym, the staff told her she was no longer welcome. Members had complained that she made them uncomfortable. Someone even joked that she was a walking lawsuit, a jab that stung more than she expected. Financial pressure mounted quickly. She demanded Ethan return the wedding deposits, claiming they were joint expenses, but he kept meticulous records showing he had paid for nearly everything. She tried showing up at his office, standing outside the glass doors with red eyes and shaking hands, telling the receptionist she just wanted to talk. Ethan never came out. He instructed security to escort her off the property if she returned again. Her last attempt to salvage anything was texting mutual acquaintances that she had been emotionally manipulated and pushed into bad decisions. But nobody believed her anymore. The evidence was too clear, and her constant shifting narrative only made things worse. People avoided her at grocery stores, refused to meet her eyes, whispered after she passed. She had become infamous in the small circle that once adored her. By the end of the week, Laura was sleeping in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by old posters and dusty trophies, wondering how her life had collapsed in less than 10 days. The future she pictured in Miami was gone. Derek was gone. Ethan was gone. And for the first time, she realized she had nothing left to bargain with. Not love, not reputation, not trust. Just the consequences she had created with her own hands. The day that was supposed to be Ethan and Laura's wedding arrived quietly, without fanfare, without flowers, without the weight of a future built on lies. Ethan woke up early, expecting to feel something, regret, anger, sadness, but instead he felt nothing but stillness. He brewed coffee, sat by the window, and let the morning unfold like any other day. In a strange way, it felt like freedom. Meanwhile, across town, Laura attempted to reclaim control of the narrative. Determined to prove she was moving on, she showed up at the country club in a white dress, carrying a bouquet, accompanied by two reluctant friends she'd guilt-tripped into coming. She had posted online that she would be celebrating a new chapter, a thinly veiled attempt to reframe the humiliation of the canceled wedding. But when she walked inside, the staff stared at her blankly. There was no reservation, no event, no prepared space. Someone even asked if she was lost. Her friends shifted uncomfortably as the realization washed over her. This wasn't a grand statement, it was a spectacle. A sad performance with no audience. Guests from unrelated events whispered, pointing discreetly at the woman in a bridal dress standing in the middle of the lobby with nowhere to go. She tried to salvage it by insisting there must be a mistake, but even the manager couldn't hide his pity. When she finally walked out of the building, red-faced and trembling, her bouquet slipped from her hand and dropped onto the pavement, petals scattering like the future she once promised herself. Back in his office, Ethan wasn't thinking about her. He was finalizing paperwork for a major business acquisition he'd been negotiating for months. By noon, the deal was signed, increasing the valuation of his company to $3.5 million. His team congratulated him, unaware that he was quietly rebuilding more than just his professional life. For the first time in weeks, he felt proud, not because of the number, but because he had managed to hold himself together through the storm. In the evenings, Ethan began therapy, sitting in a small office with warm lighting and a therapist who spoke gently but directly. He unpacked the betrayal, the shame, the self-doubt, the questions that had gnawed at him in the quiet moments. Sometimes it made him angry. Sometimes it made him numb. But gradually, he felt something unexpected, the slow return of his own voice. A voice not shaped by manipulation or fear. He started exercising again, eating better, sleeping longer. He dusted off hobbies he had abandoned during his relationship, playing guitar, hiking on weekends, hosting game nights with Mark and a few close friends. Laughter returned to his life in small, steady waves. A few months later, he agreed to go on a casual date arranged by friends. It wasn't dramatic or intense. It was simple, light, human. And for the first time, Ethan realized he wasn't afraid of the future anymore. Laura, meanwhile, was working part-time at a local cafe, living with her parents, and avoiding social events where people whispered behind her back. Her world had shrunk to the size of her consequences. She watched from a distance as Ethan moved forward without her, thriving in ways she never imagined. On what should have been their anniversary, Ethan sat on his porch with a warm drink, listening to quiet music. There was no bitterness, no longing, just peace. And the calm understanding that sometimes the greatest victories aren't loud or dramatic. They're simply choosing yourself after someone else tried to break you. Months passed before Laura attempted one final reach for redemption. She didn't call Ethan herself. Instead, her mother left a trembling voicemail, explaining that Laura was sorry, that she had made terrible mistakes, that she hoped Ethan might give her a chance to talk. Ethan listened quietly, then deleted the message without hesitation. He felt no anger, only clarity. He had learned to trust his instincts again. He had learned that love without honesty is nothing but a beautifully wrapped trap. Most importantly, he had learned that choosing peace over chaos is its own form of victory. Laura's life remained suspended in the fallout she created. No partner, no home of her own, no plan, no Miami dream, not even the shared streaming accounts she once took for granted. Ethan didn't celebrate her downfall, but he didn't rescue her from it either. Some lessons, he realized, only take root when someone is allowed to face the consequences alone. On a quiet evening, as he closed the door to his home, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Closure, and the unmistakable sense that the life waiting ahead of him was finally, blessedly, his again.